What's up, everyone? Welcome to TYT. I'm Anna Kasparian. Joining us today is Ida Rodriguez. And I already know you're typing in those love comments because you guys love it when Ida's on. I love it when she's on. Ida, thank you for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
So let me make a few notes about our partner and give you an update on our fundraising efforts. And then, of course, we'll move on to the train wreck, which was, of course, Jonathan Swan interviewing Donald Trump. Many of you tweeted me about it. Yes, we are going to talk about it, along with Trump's efforts to ban TikTok. Lots of great stories to get to. But first, let me tell you about Aspiration. We've joined Aspiration, our partner, to basically engage in a sweepstakes, which is super exciting because the giveaway is an e-scooter, and it's nearly $2,000 for an e-scooter, which is pretty pricey. And if you want to look as cool as JR Jackson does on that e-scooter, all you need to do is go to tyt.com/greensummer to find all the details on how to enter to win. But real quick to go through it, all you need to do is open a save and spend account by Aspiration for your chance to win. If you already have that account, you also do have an opportunity to win by referring friends. But again, you need to learn the details by going to tyt.com/greensummer. Real quick, let's take a look at our thermometer. As you guys know, we're trying to raise some money to keep TYT sustainable. And one of the best ways to do that is to be held accountable by you, our audience. And yesterday we were like around 7,000 something, and now we're at $8,907. Thank you so much for supporting TYT. If you'd like to contribute, any little bit counts. Go to tyt.com/go. All right, well, let's get to the news.
I think it's under control. I'll tell you what.
How? 1,000 Americans are dying a day.
They are dying. That's true. And it is what it is.
At this point, most Americans are used to Donald Trump's callous nature, especially when it comes to the death and destruction caused by coronavirus and his inability to provide any type of leadership or response to this pandemic that would save people's lives. During a recent interview with AXIOS's Jonathan Swan, Donald Trump gave us even more insight into just how little he cares about the lives of Americans, who have already died, and the lives of Americans that could be lost moving forward. Let's go to another portion of his conversation.
The figure I look at is death. And death is going up now. Okay, and it's 1,000 a day.
If you look at death.
Yeah, it's going up again.
Let's look.
Daily death.
Take a look at some of these charts.
I'd love to.
We're gonna look.
Let's look.
And if you look at death.
Yeah, it's started to go up again.
Well, right here, the United States is lowest in numerous categories. We're lower than the world.
Lower than the world?
Lower than
what is that?
Europe.
In what?
Look.
In what?
Take a look. Right here. Here's case death.
Oh, you're doing death as a proportion of cases. I'm talking about death as a proportion of population. That's where the US is really bad.
Well,
much worse than South Korea, Germany, etc.
You can't do that. You have
Why
to go,
can't I do that?
You have to go by where, look, here is the United States. You have to go by the cases. The cases.
Why not as a proportion of population?
Well, Donald Trump did slip a little bit of truth in that statement when he said that the United States is lower than the world. And if he's referring to how poorly we've handled this pandemic compared to other countries around the world, he would be correct. In fact, let me just go to some of the updated numbers on this pandemic in the United States, because Jonathan Swan is correct. 1,000 people, oftentimes more than 1,000 people die a day as a result of coronavirus. And currently we have 158,000 total deaths. And the US population is 323.2 million people. So about 0.05% of the population has died as a result of this pandemic. Now, I do want to just quickly go to the next video because Donald Trump seems to be under the impression that we're doing far better than anyone else when it comes to testing, when it comes to saving people's lives. That is not the case. That is not true. Let's take a look at his argument and we'll debunk it.
Well, look at South Korea, for example. 51 million population, 300 deaths. It's like, it's crazy.
You don't
compared to
know
other
that.
countries. I do. It's
You
on
don't know that.
You think they're faking their statistics? South Korea?
I won't get into that because they have a very good relationship with the country. But you don't know that. And they have spikes. Look, here's
Germany low, 9,000.
Here's one right here, United States. You take the number of cases.
Okay.
Now look, we're last, meaning we're first.
Last, I don't know what we're first in. As a what?
Take a look. Again, it's cases. And we have cases because of the testing.
1,000 Americans are dying a day, but I understand on cases it's different.
No, but you're not reporting it correctly, Jonathan.
I think I am, but
if you take a look at this other chart, look, this is our testing, I believe. This is the testing,
Yeah, we do more tests.
No, wait a minute. Well, don't we get credit for that? And because we do more tests, we have more cases.
All right, so since the comparison between the United States and South Korea came up, I thought it was important to actually share the data and the numbers with you. So let me just go back to the previous graphic because it's important to contextualize how well South Korea has handled this. So again, in the United States, there have been 158,000 total deaths as a result of coronavirus. Now the total US population is 328.2 million people. And so the percentage of deaths accounts for 0.05% of the population, okay? Now let's take a look at South Korea, where the population is 51.64 million people. When it comes to the number of deaths, 301. So what percentage of their population died as a result of coronavirus? 0.0006%. We are not doing better than South Korea. We are not the best when it comes to testing. This country has been a complete and utter failure. This government has failed the American people, and people are dying left and right, more than 1,000 people a day. And Donald Trump refuses to take any responsibility for it. Far worse than that, he refuses to acknowledge what the reality of the situation is. Ida.
So first of all, I just want to apologize for laughing because I don't want people to think that I am laughing at the situation, but laughing at how ridiculous it is that that is the leader of the free world. And if I were you, Donald Trump, I would hate Obama too, because Obama can put sentences together. He knows how to pull up a chart and read it. And, I just understand. Happy birthday, Obama. I just wanted to say that I'm embarrassed. But I've taken note of the people who say only this number of people have died. They are all people who have not lost someone to COVID. It's very easy to say only this number of people have died because you haven't been directly affected by that. If Ivanka died of COVID, America was shut down until that Donald Trump could figure out how to find a cure for that. And even with her, I don't wish death upon her. But what I'm saying is, but look at the people who are dying of COVID. Look at the numbers of the people who are dying. They're Black and brown, and in disproportionate numbers. Not to undermine the number of white people who have died, because they're all human lives. But where are all the all lives matter people right now, while this man is employing this harsh lack of it's apathy. It's really apathy. And Absolutely. The only reason he's sitting down to talk about it is because it gives him an opportunity to speak and to be seen. But it's not because it's about this. Every single interview in the last couple of weeks that Donald Trump has done nothing but show how small his mental capacity is. From the haiku that he recited the other day to prove that his mental capacity was there, to this pulling up this chart and saying we are better than the world. It's like somebody that doesn't know that Africa is a continent and thinks it's a country. We are doing better than the world. Go ahead, Anna.
Yeah, no, I think brilliant points all around. You're absolutely right. And, the one commonality among people who have died from coronavirus, of course, they tend to be older. Of course, disproportionately, this virus has killed people of color. But a through line that you'll notice is poverty. People who don't even have the financial means for an emergency, much less medical bills associated with coronavirus. Many people don't even bother to go to the hospital. I mean, we had a long discussion about how uniquely disadvantaged this country is when it comes to a pandemic because of how broken our healthcare system is. And he keeps promising a revamped healthcare model, which of course he hasn't delivered on. And to be quite honest, I wouldn't want him to deliver on it because his idea of fixing things, I mean, we've seen what his idea of fixing things looks like. And this country has further devolved in every single possible way. I also want to note that one thing that South Korea did that we did not do, South Korea's COVID-19 response strategy sits atop 3 pillars, reports The Atlantic: fast and free testing, expansive tracing technology, something that we didn't even attempt to do, okay, and mandatory isolation of the most severe cases. Now, and by the way, in South Korea, and this is partly a cultural thing, there is no issue regarding wearing masks. There's no fight about that. And so the culture is different, the leadership is different, and more importantly, I think this is another through line that you're gonna notice. You know, countries that have really handled this virus well understand the importance of community. They understand the importance of their, the lives of their peers, of their neighbors, of their families. They value this collectivist approach. Whereas in the United States, individualism has been drilled into people's heads so much that these morons running around shooting people up because they're being asked to wear a mask think that they're fighting for our liberties and our freedoms. That's what we're dealing with right now. And Ida, I want to just quickly go to this next clip. And when we come back, I want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah.
I think you misunderstand me. I'm criticizing your ability to draw a crowd. Are you kidding me? I've covered you for 5 years. You draw massive crowds, you get huge ratings. I'm asking about the public health.
And I canceled another one. I had to cancel it. We're going to have a great crowd in New Hampshire, and I canceled it for the same reason.
But here's the question. I've covered you for a long time. I've gone to your rallies. I've talked to your people. They love you. They listen to you. They listen to every word you say. They hang on your every word. They don't listen to me or the media or Fauci. They think we're fake news. They want to get their advice from you. And so when they hear you say everything's under control, don't worry about wearing masks, I mean, these are people, many of them are older people,
What's
Mr. President.
What's your definition of control? Yeah. Under the
it's giving them a false sense of security.
Now, I think it's under control. I'll tell you what.
How? 1,000 Americans are dying a day.
They are dying. That's true. And it is what it is. But that doesn't mean we aren't doing everything we can. It's under control as much as you can control it. This is a horrible plague that beset us.
You really think this is as much as we can control it?
So Ida, all these people are dying, but it is what it is, according to Donald Trump.
The only thing, not even the camera work was under control for that thing. That looked like a sketch. The cameraman was all shaky because he probably was laughing. But what I wanted to say, Anna, is I've been tested for COVID 3 times in the last couple of months, in the last month and a half. One test was $50, one test was $125, and one test was $250. And a lot of those costs were assumed by the production companies that I'm working with so that I can work. But talk about somebody who in the moment of this pandemic hasn't been working. Let's not forget the incredible amount of false positives that have been claimed by the blood test. Like we have a serious problem with quality control, consistency, and let's just talk about it, economics. A person who hasn't been working since the beginning of March, who might be afraid that they have COVID, they don't want to go to an overwhelmed hospital because they may very well leave with it, going to a private source to get tested, the price, they're gouging. The same test that I got for $50 in one place was available in another place for $250. That's a real big difference. So how is the average American who right now is fighting for unemployment, probably fighting a landlord or the mortgage companies and the banks, and has to worry about COVID? Only a person who is dripped in privilege would be oblivious to the realities of what it is to be scared to have COVID right now. Yeah,
no, you're absolutely right. And look, if you thought, all right, maybe maybe Donald Trump misspoke, right? Maybe he's not as callous as you'd expect him to be as a progressive. Well, this next clip really, solidified his lack of interest, his total apathy when it comes to the well-being of his fellow Americans, because he doesn't even know how many people have died. Take a look.
You changed your message this week in terms of you cancelled the Jacksonville convention. You said wear a mask. You're saying, that it's going to get worse before it gets better. It's not something you like to say. I know you said that. The big question,
not get worse like the original flow. You understand that, but
I hope not. It's 1,000.
Now, if you look, Arizona's going down.
If I could just finish my question,
Texas is going down and Florida's going down.
The question is, are you going to, even some of your own aides wonder whether you would stick to that message until election day, whether in a week or two you won't say, right, we've got to reopen again. We can't do this stuff anymore, that you'll get bored of talking about the virus and go back to that sort of cheerleading?
I never get bored of talking about this. It's too big a thing. And again,
so will you stick to that message?
By China, it should have been stopped by China, and it wasn't.
But now it's here.
We have
you're the
it
president.
here. And I think I'm very consistent. No, this is a very serious thing. Do you think we have 140,000 people at this moment? This is a very, very serious situation.
So he doesn't know, Ida, the exact number of, and by the way, every report that you see tends to round up the number of people who have died, right? So you don't usually get the exact, but you should have a better sense as president of the United States, the number of Americans who have died as a result of your lack of leadership, but he doesn't care. He doesn't care. And to be quite honest with you guys, I'm tired of the repetition. Like, we already know he's racist. We already know he doesn't care about our lives. We know that his mental capacity is questionable, to say the least. Okay, I'm being generous here. And every time someone in the mainstream media interviews him, it's like, brava, you have uncovered what an idiot Donald Trump is. Yeah, we know. So the question, like, how many times are we gonna cover this? We know what he is. We know what he does. We know what he cares about. And the only thing he cares about is himself. So congratulations, Axios. You did what a million other news organizations did. Reveal what a piece of crap Donald Trump really is. Now the question is, what happens now? I would love to see some accountability when it comes to members of Congress who would rather tweet about it than go and do something about it. That's my issue.
Yeah, when he said Florida and Texas, they're going down. Yeah, if those governors keep listening to you, they are gonna go down. Absolutely gonna go down. The thing is that we have to really remember that in November, a lot of people who pretend that they don't like Donald Trump will still vote for him, right? Because there are a lot of people who support Donald Trump in secret. And at this point, the only reason that I think that they could possibly be supporting him is because they're either white nationalists and racists. Because what else is he offering anybody else in the United States who is not in the top 1%? What is he offering anybody else who is not part of the, big pharma or the big bank industry? What is he offering you other than that he's going to get rid of the immigrants, that he's going to let Black people continue to get murdered? Like, what is he offering the rest of the country that is not that belongs to the group who will directly benefit from Donald Trump's corruption in office, right? So so we have to really mobilize ourselves, and this apathy that has stricken us, because this really looks bad for us as America with our options, but we have to get rid of that, because that right there came to destroy and ruin what we know as any semblance of a democracy does not stand a chance with Donald Trump in office, trying to push an election back, taking rule of law and stepping all over it. So at this point, you have to ask yourselves, is your healthcare is important? Is your unemployment, this pandemic? You have to weigh all those options. And if hating a Black person weighs more than that for you, then you need to go. Because at this point, all hands need to be on deck to get that out of the White House, because according to history, our democracy's time is up, right? So we got to fight for it at all costs. We got to reshape it. We got to redefine it, because they have turned it into trash. That is why someone like this is in office, right? But we have to fight for our now he idolizes dictators. He befriends them. He does not speak publicly against them. And we're under this illusion that he's trying to uphold our Constitution and our democracy. How so? By breaking all the rules that he's not supposed to be breaking and trying to postpone our election? That sounds like something that happens in one of those countries. That doesn't happen here.
Yeah, and our system of government is flawed. The whole notion of checks and balances, falls apart once you have feckless representatives and senators in Congress. And that includes Republicans who have gone along with everything Trump has done. I'm looking at you, Susan Collins, you're pathetic. Yep. And you should be voted out of office. But it also includes Democrats who think that their, Twitter activism should be a good substitute to actually holding Trump accountable and doing what it takes through our legal system, through the way our government is structured to hold him accountable. But, he definitely does help them raise money, doesn't he? We got to take a break. When we come back, we have some more train wreck moments from this interview with Jonathan Swan, but on different topics, including Trump's thoughts on sending federal agents to Portland to crack people's skulls. We'll be right back. Hey everyone, welcome back to TYT. Anna and Ida with you. I'm gonna read a few comments and then we'll move on to the rest of the news. Melissa writes in to TYT Live on Twitter, use that hashtag to communicate with us. Turning on TYT Live and seeing funny Ida absolutely made my day. Huge thanks to her and my girl Anna for making my day look up. Thank you, Melissa. We love hearing from you. Thank you for writing in. From the Super Chats comments, we have Michael writing in saying, love this show. Anna, you are great. Thank you, I appreciate that. The Wiz is here, says, I only get $108 with state unemployment. I wish I could go back to work and not have to wonder if I'm going to have my bills paid. You're experiencing a predicament that so many Americans are also faced with. And the fact that there still isn't financial relief offered through a congressional bill is beyond infuriating. And again, goes back to my frustrations in the previous segment regarding Congress. I apologize, someone wrote in, I don't have it in front of me, but someone disagreed with my take on Jonathan Swan's interview. He argues that, Jonathan Swan pushed back and that's what makes this interview different from others. I agree, he did a much better job than some of the other so-called journalists who just allowed Trump to steamroll them. So I give him a lot of credit for that. But what did we learn through that interview that we didn't already know? That's what my question is, right? And it goes back to what the whole purpose and value of journalism is. Is it to just repeat what we already knew? Is it to, bolster whatever political thought or agenda? Or is it to actually inform people with information they need to make the right decisions for themselves when they go cast a ballot? And so anyway, it is what it is. We might have that disagreement, but we're gonna keep talking about it. So let's go to the next story. Trump's train wreck interview with Axios touched on the upcoming presidential election, and Jonathan Swan asked him to further elaborate on his threat to possibly not accept the outcome of the election. Let's hear what he had to say.
You told Fox News recently that you couldn't say whether you'd accept the results of the 2020 election. What does that actually look like as the sitting president? I mean, it's unprecedented. What would that actually look
Hillary
like?
Clinton never accepted him.
She conceded on him.
She still doesn't accept him, and she got
that's the important
very
point.
easily.
That's the important point. She conceded on election night. Now, she grumbled about it and said all sorts of things.
Grumbled? She wrote books about it.
She wrote books.
Don't use the word grumbled.
Fine, but
she wrote books about it.
That's fine, but I'm just.
She got beaten easy.
I get it.
306 to 223.
I'm not disputing you beat Hillary Clinton.
That's a lot.
Listen, what I'm asking is you'll be the sitting president in the White House. What does that look like? Not accepting.
I'll tell you what it looks like.
Are you litigating?
Let me tell you what it looks like.
Okay.
So we have a new phenomena. It's called mail-in voting, where a governor
It's been here since the Civil War.
In terms of the kind of millions and millions of ballots, they've never.
It'll be bigger this year because of the pandemic.
Bigger, not bigger, massively bigger.
Yeah, because of the pandemic.
So they're going to send tens of millions of ballots to California, all over the place. Who's going to get them? I have a friend lives in Westchester County.
They send applications, not ballots.
His son passed away. He had a beautiful, wonderful son, young man, passed away 7 years ago. He called me. He said, I just got a ballot
Probably
for
an
my
application.
son Robert.
Probably
He died 7 years ago. Somebody got a ballot for a dog. Somebody got a ballot for something else. You got millions of ballots going. Nobody even knows where they're going. You look at some of the corruption having to do with universal mail-in voting. Absentee voting is okay. You have to apply. You have to go through a process.
You have to apply for mail-in.
Absentee
It's the
voting
same thing.
Conservatives always love to use animals to make arguments, against something. Like, for instance, like when we were trying to legalize same-sex marriage, for instance, and they immediately go to, well, then people can marry their dogs. And now with this, well, all of a sudden, dogs are going to get ballots. Like, they have this weird obsession with making stupid arguments using animals. And by the way, animals are innocent. But let's look at the actual numbers. Is voter fraud through mail-in ballots a thing? No, it's not. In fact, if you look at the instances of people attempting to commit voter fraud through mail-in ballots, the number is incredibly negligible and would make no difference when it comes to an election. So this is based on actual analysis, not right-wing talking points that are regurgitated by idiots on Twitter. So let me give you the details. So in a Washington Post analysis, for instance, of data collected by 3 vote by mail states with help from the nonprofit Electronic Registration Information Center, found that officials identified just 372 possible cases of double voting or voting on behalf of deceased people out of the 14.6 million votes cast by mail in the 2016 and 2018 general elections. Or, just to give you a percentage here, 0.0025%. Doesn't seem like a big problem. Let's move on to the next graphic. A 2016 pilot study found that the system could identify potential cases of improper voting by analyzing states' voter history data to detect whether individuals voted twice in multiple states or on behalf of a deceased person. 112 cases of potential fraud out of about 11 million ballots cast in 5 states were turned over to law enforcement authorities, or 0.001%. One more graphic for you, Ida, and I want to hear your thoughts. Washington announced last month that it had referred 142 cases of suspected improper voting in 2018 to local election officials, or 0.004% of the more than 3.1 million votes cast. And by the way, let me just repeat: suspected improper voting. So who knows what percentage of that tiny amount actually did engage in improper voting. But nonetheless, if every single one of those cases was proven to be true, the amount, again, is so tiny, so negligible, that to make the argument that disenfranchising voters and suppressing voters is worth it is just ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. And we know why he's against mail-in voting. He wants as little people to vote as possible because he's a complete and utter failure and is trailing Biden of all people. And I don't even think Biden's a strong candidate in the double digits, even in swing states. Yeah. Go ahead, Ida.
Notice he said California, like that was a slip. It's on his subconscious mind that California is a state that they're coming in from California. I actually don't want to hear anything from the president that withheld people's pay or relief money so that he could put his name on their checks. And they were sending those checks to people who were dead, and they made mistakes there as well. And I didn't see him, talk about how flawed his organization, because I call them an organization at this point, because that's a crime operation over there. That's not even a democratic government anymore. He didn't say anything about how flawed that organization was. And what's funny is that he is so concerned with those votes being counted properly and the mail-in votes being, accounted for correctly, But he didn't have that kind of care for the money going out to people who were starving during a pandemic, who were sheltered in place. Like, to me, that's a problem for me. You employ far more passion. Look, he was more passionate about the votes than he was about the people who died. Like, if that doesn't tell you something about who he is, he's more concerned about holding on to power than the lives and well-being of his constituency, regardless of where they are in the country. And that is very telling. So for me, from this point forward, I just want to point out the continuous things that people need to look out for who still are on board with this maniac, because he doesn't care about your life. He cares about your vote more than he does about your life.
Oh, absolutely. And just a quick note to the director, I'm gonna actually skip ahead to the last video for this story. But while you get that prepped, let me just respond to Ida. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, the reason why there was such passion in this portion of the interview, as opposed to, any type of feeling, any type of like human emotion when it came to the number of people who have died as a result of coronavirus, is because all he cares about is himself. Yep. He's proven that so many times. And this is yet another example of it. I mean, one other unrelated example is how he's trying to get a cut of whatever deal is made between Microsoft and TikTok. That is unprecedented, unethical, unheard of, but he's like a mob boss. He's constantly looking for opportunities to further his political aspirations, but more importantly, to further enrich himself and his company, his organization, Trump Organization. With that said, I do want to go to this one part of the interview that just like, it was just incredible to me, because he is also delusional about the amount of Americans who are willing to put their lives at risk to go see him at rallies and other election events. Keep in mind that he does these events knowing that it's incredibly dangerous during this pandemic, but he does it anyway. Let's take a look at what he had to say during this interview, though.
By June, we knew things were bad. And the last time I was with you was the day before your Tulsa rally in the Oval. And you were saying big, huge crowd, it was indoors.
By the way,
these people, they listen to you.
Excuse me, Jeff.
Yeah.
We had a 19,000 seat stadium. First of all, we had 12,000 people, not 6,000, which you reported, another paper reported. But you couldn't even get in. It was like an armed camp.
Why would you have wanted that?
Because they had 120 Black Lives Matter people.
I understand, but why would you have wanted a huge crowd?
Excuse me, wait. And Tulsa, well, because that area was a very good area at the time. It was an area that was pretty much over. After a month later, it started going up. That's a month later. But Tulsa was a very good. Oklahoma was doing very well as a state. It was almost free. It spiked a month later, month and a half, 2 months later, but it was a good area. We had a tremendous crowd. We had tremendous response. You couldn't even, it was like an armed camp. You couldn't even get through. You couldn't get anybody in.
But
we had 12,000 people. It was incorrectly reported. The other thing we had that nobody wants to talk about, so Fox broadcast it. It was the highest rating in the history of Fox television Saturday night.
Okay, so let's talk about what's important here, which is the situation in Tulsa, both before and after the rally, especially when it comes to the number of people who had tested positive for COVID. So as of June 10th, there were 117 new cases of coronavirus in Oklahoma. Roughly a month later, there were 1,714 new cases, and yes, local politicians and authorities in the state of Oklahoma did confirm that Trump's rally was a super spreader event. Although it was a super spreader event, I also want to correct and debunk what Trump said in that video, because the truth is his crowd was not big. We reported on this. The people on TikTok mobilized and bought tickets, or I shouldn't say bought, they reserved tickets which they didn't show up for, but that wasn't the only thing. Luckily, even Trump supporters are somewhat sophisticated enough to understand that going to the rally would have been a terrible idea. And so the Tulsa Fire Department estimated the crowd at the Tulsa rally was just under 6,200 people, far less than the capacity, which was 19,200 people. And just recently, he was bragging about his crowds. And this is what his big crowds look like these days. Let's take a look at the last graphic here. Yeah, massive crowd, big crowd.
And no mention of, no mention of Herman Cain, which I think is so dishonorable, and that's what they do with people of color. That while they can use them as tokens to, speak their points about people of color, and then this man passed away, and they want to distance themselves as much as they can so that his death is not associated with that rally where he was without a mask around other people. And why does it matter? Why is he so concerned with those numbers and not the numbers of the people who are dying in this country, right? Like, we've been talking about numbers with Donald Trump since inauguration, which he has this fantasy about these imaginary people that show up to support him that no one else can confirm. But he's always talking about his cognitive skills. We have to check in with him. There were, you just think about him. He wants to do this with TikTok. He tried to do away with it. He talked about selling Puerto Rico, selling a country away that was so mistreated and mishandled by him during a hurricane. I don't understand why people are still talking about Donald Trump, and even more why they're still talking to him. All we need to be focused about is how we get rid of this cancer that has set our country, our civilization back. Even though a lot of these things have been going on, nobody's denying that systemic racism hasn't been here. But if you look at the condition of the country, it's like a car that was okay, and it is now ready for the junkyard. That's what he's done with America, making fun of other countries that have handled this pandemic far more sophisticated than him, countries that are being, that women are running, who have showed up and really handled this crisis. He called it a plague. He called this pandemic a plague. Run the tape back to a few months ago to what he was calling it then. Now it's a plague, but it's a plague because he wants to associate it to China, because China didn't handle it. The United States of America is not China's problem. It is not.
Yep. Well, we got to take a break, but when we come back, we'll get some of Trump's statements on protesters and then give you the reality about, something that he loves to brag about when it's convenient for him, criminal justice reform. But we have the facts. So come right back and I'll give you those details. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to TYT. Before we get to the rest of the news today, I just want to say thank you to Central Committee, because they have just rated us. And in the context of Twitch, that is a good thing, okay? They've rated us with a party of 300. So I just want to show you guys some love and give you a shout out. Thank you so much. Obi Mom Kenobi is just a beast, has gifted us 10 subs, or gave out 10 subs. And that's her 287th gift sub to TYT. Thank you so much. And Mufasia says that we just learned donated 100 bits and referred to us as the A-Team, Ida. So that deserves a little shimmy. Anyway, I love the Twitch audience. It was a lot of fun doing an episode of not Common Room. Well, I have been on Common Room too, but between me and Uger, last week was between Brett and me, and it was awesome. So make sure you check that out as well. All right, without further ado, let's get to the rest of the news. Trump attempted to justify his use of federal agents, which only increased and escalated tensions and violence in Portland, during his interview with Jonathan Swan. Let's take a look.
These are Homeland Security people. They're securing a courthouse.
They're Border Patrol.
They're Homeland Security.
Elite units.
Border. Hopefully they have ICE in there. Hopefully they have ICE. Now, do you know why they're unmarked? Because
why?
These terrorists, these Antifa people, these people that are anarchists and agitators, when they see the name on a uniform of a person, a policeman, a law enforcement person, they find out where that person lives. And then they go and they scare the hell out of the person's family Why should you have identification? My name is Bill Smith, and here's where I live, and I'm a member of.
The really serious concern is
No,
the
that's
reports.
not
About
a
that.
serious
The serious
concern.
concern is the reports of people being rounded up and not being told why they're being detained. That's what's being investigated
Why?
by Mr. President. The
Why they're
inspectors
being
generals.
detained?
The inspectors generals.
You know why they're being detained? Well, yeah.
There's an investigation. Do you support that investigation?
Well, I haven't seen the result yet.
But do you
Let me see
support the
result.
initiative of it?
No, I think that actually,
You don't?
I think Antifa should be investigated, not the law enforcement.
We know that based on what the authorities themselves are reporting. We had Asher Caulfield, who helps produce this show, do some fact checking and look into specific instances of Antifa causing problems during these protests. And she failed to find anything of substance. And I'll give you that evidence in just a minute. But I do want to talk about this notion that federal agents were a positive presence during these protests, because that is not the case. They only escalated violence. And we have proof of that because beginning last week, federal agents started leaving Portland and allowing protesters to practice their constitutionally protected right to assemble and to free speech, okay? So NBC News recently reported that tensions have largely calmed since last week's announcement that federal agents would take a step back from policing the Mark O. Hatfield federal courthouse, a deal the Oregon officials hoped would ease friction between law enforcement officers and protesters who vowed to continue demonstrating until the agents left. By Friday night of last week, by the way, the fence separating protesters from Homeland Security officers was decorated with balloons and upside down flags sewn together with BLM painted across. At one point during that night, a small firework was shot over the fence. As it fizzled out, protesters pleaded with each other to remain calm and peaceful. Later, a few small fires were occasionally started outside the courthouse, with at least one put out by another protester or other protesters. So I give you that because the protesters overwhelmingly do not want to divert the message to nonsense. They want to focus on what's important here, and that is that we need a change in how policing is done in this country. It's not just about raising awareness about the disproportionate number of Black and brown people who get murdered by cops in this country. It's about legitimately finding solutions and changing the system. By the way, prior to the agents' arrival, protesters focused on police brutality, systemic racism, and the Black Lives Matter movement, but tensions flared after federal officers showed up at the urging of President Donald Trump to dominate ongoing unrest. So Trump specifically escalated violence in Portland. There's no question about it. The evidence bears that out. But what the evidence does not bear out is that Antifa has become any type of problem during these demonstrations. I'll get to that in just a minute, but Ida, I wanted you to jump in.
Well, what I also thought was interesting is how much we focused on whatever it is that the protesters were doing and not on how it was handled according to the law of the United States of America. So you had officers that took the law into their hands. They were not reading people Miranda rights. They were kidnapping people, putting them in vans, driving them off. And I don't understand why the rest of the country is not more alarmed about that, because depending on the administration deciding what they think a civil unrest is and addressing it in that manner, who's to determine how, if some, and let me be ridiculous here, some Girl Scout troops start, protesting, or the University of Michigan fans. I guarantee you that when one of those protests happens in those colleges and predominantly white students go out, set cars on fires, and have these types of outbursts because their team lost. If you deploy these officers into that setting and they start arresting white sons and daughters of lawyers and doctors, that the outcome would be very, very different. And so while we're sitting here talking about what the protesters were doing and where they were not doing, we should be talking about how they did not deal with that legally, and it was not handled according to the rules and the laws of this country. And that's what we should be alarmed, because they keep pushing the line further and further.
Yeah, Ida, you make such a great point. In fact, in that exchange, Jonathan Swan brought up an investigation into the Department of Homeland Security. So let me give you details about that. So the House Intelligence Committee is concerned about some of the surveillance that took place by federal agents during these protests. And so there were two specific journalists, we covered this story in great detail, who were being surveilled by the Department of Homeland Security. And as a result of that, the acting undersecretary for DHS's intelligence office, Brian Murphy, has been reassigned. So he was essentially fired from that position, but that's not good enough. Luckily, there is a House committee investigating this further, and that does violate our rights. I mean, journalists have a right to be there. They have a right to report on that story, and to know that they were being surveilled that way is disgusting, but it goes beyond the journalists. The fact that protesters, as you mentioned, were being snatched up and thrown into unmarked cars, not knowing who had basically done that, who had detained them, is a huge problem. And it is a violation of people's rights. And so with that said, let me also just mention or remind everyone of the evidence that I promised regarding Antifa. So the Associated Press actually looked into this to see if Antifa had a significant presence during these protests and if they were causing any type of problem. The Associated Press found in an analysis of more than 200 arrests, even those accused of breaking the law during the liberal cities' nightly rallies don't neatly fit into Trump's depiction of protesters as anarchists and agitators. The AP found that 95% of those arrested by police and federal agents were local. The vast majority have no criminal record in Oregon. Many appear to be college students. Their average age was 28, court records show. They're mostly charged with misdemeanors, like failing to comply with a lawful order, while some face felonies like arson and assault on an officer. Most people have been released and some have been arrested more than once for similar offenses. But in none of these cases did the Associated Press find individuals associated with Antifa. So to refer to Antifa as terrorists, individuals who should be investigated rather than doing a full investigation of authorities who have violated Americans' constitutional rights, is just outright disgusting, authoritarian, and exactly what you can expect from someone like Donald Trump.
They always go for the journalists first, right? That's part of if you think about what happened in Russia, you think about, they always attack the journalists first. But everyone who is fighting for the equality of people and justice are considered radical. I mean, the rap that they've tried to put on Antifa, Black Lives Matter. And when I say Black Lives Matter, I'm talking about the ideology, not the organization, which are two different things. Because people say, well, Black Lives Matter got $3 million. Black Lives Matter is a belief. It is a collective belief amongst people who have humanity that Black people's lives matter just as much as everybody else's. So, they keep hijacking these movements and giving them these names. They want to make Antifa this terroristic organization. But why are we talking about all these other organizations like that? They are the ones that are a threat to our Constitution and to the citizens of this country.
Well, Ida, when it comes to those people, I mean, there's very fine people on that side, right? I mean, Trump has said it himself. But before we run out of time, let's go to one more clip from this exchange.
Why do you think black men are 2.5 times more likely to be killed by police than white men?
That I don't know, but I don't like it.
But you must have thought about it.
I don't know why, but I don't like it. I do know this.
Does it speak to something systemic?
Police have killed many white people also.
But proportionally, what does it speak to?
It speaks to something, if that's the number, you're telling me a number. Okay, if that's the number, it speaks to something that to me is unacceptable.
And what do you do about it then?
Well, I think we've already done a lot of things.
But you haven't, it still exists.
Let me just tell you.
No. I understand your achievements. I know what you're going to say. I'm not suggesting you haven't done a lot economically.
I've done a thing called criminal justice
I get it.
reform.
I'm just saying what changes.
President Obama couldn't get done.
It's not my friend. I'm asking about that statistic.
He tried, but he couldn't get it done.
Trump loves to cite his so-called work on criminal justice reform. But as we've shared with you guys previously, he actually behind the scenes regrets focusing on criminal justice reform at all. In fact, he had told some of his staff that he shouldn't have listened to the advice by Jared Kushner. I'll get to that in just a second. But the more important issue here is what was mentioned by Jonathan Swan. Black Americans account for less than 13% of the US population, but are killed by police at more than twice the rate of white Americans. And Trump doesn't care about criminal justice reform. According to Axios, he never really wanted criminal justice reform. And that's according to people who have discussed the subject with him privately. He's told them he only supported it because Kushner asked him to. Trump now says privately it was misguided to pursue this policy, undercutting his instincts, and that he probably won't win any more African-American support because of it. It always goes back to him, Ida. It always goes back to him.
Yeah, we all know how Donald Trump feels about anybody who has any form of melanin in their skin. And the fact that he is disputing the numbers. And then when he says, oh, if that's what you say the numbers are, then that's indicative that your president, the president of the free world, is not even, he doesn't even know the numbers. He didn't know the numbers of the people who died. He doesn't know the statistics of the Black people getting killed by the police. What does he know? What does he know? That 6,000 imaginary people showed up at his rally in Tulsa? That's what he knows? Come on, son, get him out.
Yep. Old School is next. Old School is next, and we'll be having a great post-game show today. Me and Ida will be hosting. Make sure you check it out, tyt.com/join. See you soon.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Young Turks. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, and I'll see you soon.